Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Forum of New Education. Today we are meeting two people from abroad and one person from Warsaw, Poland. Oh, okay. So Michał Malinowski. Hello to our audience. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about well-being in education, well-being in respect to all members of the society. So starting with children, finishing with adults, both parents and educators. We would like you to share this movie to your friends so we can talk to more people and we could respond to more of your questions and concerns concerning this issue. I would like to introduce Robin Whitaker. If you could tell us something about you, what are you doing and where are you and what's the weather like in your place?
Thank you so much, Rajek. So I'm Robin Whitaker. I'm from South Africa, based in Johannesburg, which is the economic capital of the country. And the weather is, well, it's dark right now. So we're on the same timeline as you. So nighttime here, winter, but beautiful, beautiful sunny day today. Just a little bit chilly this evening. And I'm a very hybrid person. I come from a medical background. I've been involved in education for the last 4 years as part of an organization called Symphonia for South Africa. And I'm about to set off on a journey around looking at deep collaboration and the development of high-functioning ecosystems for impact. So exciting times.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Carla, could you tell us something about you?
Hi, yeah, I am currently in Doha. It's very, very hot here, extremely hot. And so these are the months when we stay inside. I've been working here for 8 years. I work in a very special sports academy where we teach boys who are training to be elite athletes, and we design special curriculums for them for their learning intervention. And so it's really exciting work. You have to be really creative. And it's a place where well-being has kind of become a big issue in my work in the last few years, not only for the students, but also for the staff. So it's very, very different work. It's different from regular education. You have to pull out lots of creative strength all the time.
Okay. Michał? Michał, you are muted. Okay.
No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I am from the Storyteller Museum in Poland, the place devoted to gather and present oral traditions from different parts of the world. And throughout presenting these oral traditions, I try to present oral wisdom. And I try to make an experience throughout storytelling of discovery, the new way of, or the discovery of well-being throughout storytelling. Because you can change perception of the world throughout the story. And the story can have a very strong impact on you, and throughout changing this perception, you can discover that the well-being is right inside you.
Okay. So maybe why well-being is so important for you, Carla? What's so important for you as a person in well-being?
Well, I think it's something that nothing functions well if it's not in a state of well-being. And sometimes we learn this when we're not in a state of well-being, and then it becomes apparent that we should have been paying more attention to it. But it is the core of everything. That is what life, you know, the quality of our life boils down to. So that's why for me, it's non-negotiable, let's say. It's a must.
Okay. Robin, how it's in your...
So we are in an environment where many of our educators and many of our learners are not well. And I think well-being is such an essential element to look at, because until heart, mind, and hands are in alignment, we really cannot get the outcomes that we're hoping for. So many times we focus on the what we're doing, or you know, how we do it, and we don't understand that everything is driven from our internal energy and our internal space of well-being. And it's the most sacred place to look after first. And you can really see, certainly in our education system, that when adults battle, they don't have the capacity to do what's necessary for the children. And this element of social and emotional learning, well-being, having spaces that can contain and hold us in safety is just it's a very important issue, not only here in South Africa, but globally. And we're aware of, but we need to learn the mechanisms to move our schools into places that promote well-being.
Okay. How it's in your life? Why well-being is so important?
Well-being is part of my life, and I think it's a part of life of everybody. Everybody's searching for well-being. However, not everybody can find it. And yeah, I try to do things to enjoy as a game, as a play. And I think well-being is part of the path I am choosing in my life to achieve and to share with others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So well-being, there can be a wide range, right? Because there are all scales of gray. You can feel good or feel terrible. And there is a whole scale in between. So let's go into this darker side of well-being. What happens if you are not good, if you are in terrible state? How do you feel? What happens with your integrity? What happens with everything that is around you? Who wants to talk?
Okay, so I'll start. So I think the main thing that happens when we are unwell, and I think about this concept of eustress versus distress. So good stress versus bad stress. And when we're in a state of distress, unwellness, either mentally, physically, emotionally, it actually becomes very hard to focus and to bring what you have. A lot of energy is consumed by the awareness of the unwellness, and so you can't direct that attention towards the things that you want to achieve in the same way that you can when you are in a state of eustress or a good space, and centered within yourself. So I think lack of well-being really contributes to the inability to achieve what we are made to achieve our purpose, and to achieve well-being, to achieve what needs to be achieved, not only for ourselves personally, but for those in our care. So whether it's a parent with their child, or whether it's a teacher with their class, being distracted by your state of unwellness makes it very, very hard to bring what's necessary into that situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but so I will go to Carla. How do you feel if you are distressed? What happens to your body? What happens to your mind? What happens with you when you are really, really, really distressed?
I think you just feel a state of imbalance, you know, to begin with, and it starts off very subtly, usually with physical symptoms. Our bodies are really special because they give us messages, and they give us those messages very, very gently at first. But when we ignore those messages, they become more and more obvious. You know, they get stronger, and the more we ignore them, the worse they become, and then they start to, you know, cause extreme distress, and that eventually it leaves us, our individual person, and it starts to spread out around us. And I think that's why the individual, you know, well-being is so important, because we are not, you know, nothing happens in isolation when it comes to people. And we can see that now in the world that we live in, there is lots of issues happening as a result of, you know, a huge state of, you know, distress, let's say, or a lack of balance. And that all starts with the individual, you know, but it started off as a tiny clue inside of each person that they just ignored until it became bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm. Michał, can you follow those leads? How do you feel when you are distressed, or what leads to the distress that that you can have?
I'm usually, you know, that's the. Can you hear me? Because I have some troubles.
Yes.
Technical problems.
Right now, yes. Okay, so maybe Michał, we will wait for you, because there is your internet has to adjust to the application after you have rebooted. So, okay, what can lead to this distress, Robin? What happens that you are getting more angry, more anxious?
Yes, there are these moments when some inappropriate way of acting of people, or in a proper way, it gets me very often angry. Behave in a proper way, and they don't do that. It's, in my case,
I think that there is something wrong with Michał's internet. So maybe we can go. Robin, could you? We will wait for Michał a bit, but go, Robin, with follow-up.
Thank you. So I think from a personal perspective, and I think we all differ because we have different ways of manifesting our distress, or our when we aren't in a good space, when we're emotionally unwell. So for myself, I think it comes from not paying attention, as Carla said, to the early indications that. In my case, it's often a case of overworking, or pushing too hard, or pushing past the point where you should have actually paid attention and brought yourself back into balance. And it often starts physically, and then I think my fuse becomes a lot shorter. But I think for many people there is this progression through not physically feeling quite right, either shoulder stress, back stress, tiredness, fatigue, and then it moves on, and it actually becomes behavioral, and then it becomes emotional, and quite a long-term emotional thing. And I completely agree with Carla. I think it is about learning to become perceptive, and this is part of self-leadership, learning to become perceptive about your own cues, and knowing when to act on them, so that you don't push yourself so far that you enter into a state where you actually you can't function well, and you can't bring what is yours to bring, because so much energy and attention is going into damping down the signals coming through about your distress.
Mm-hmm. Michał, do you hear us? Could you say anything? Yeah, sorry, you are muted. Okay, go.
I had some, sorry, technical problems.
So have you heard, Robin? Have you heard question?
No, I had some problems to hearing that. So
okay, so let's go this way. What leads you to this distress? What leads you to feel bad? What leads you to not having a good mood?
So I mentioned that, yeah, that when I see some people who are not acting in a proper way, it makes me angry. And at that moment, I lost connections with harmony. And I think it is a very important issue to rediscover not losing the connections, or the way how to feel connected with the nature, how to connect it with community, how to connect it with the world. Because when we lost the connections, we lost everything. We lost everything means we lost this state of well-being. And if we feel that we are part of the harmonious world, we are part of amazing, wonderful creation of the world, then we can really feel that we have some goals to fulfill in our life.
And what are the symptoms of being distressed?
What are the
symptoms? How do you feel when you are on the edge?
Oh, the symptoms are that I'm, not behaving in a proper way as well.
What does it mean?
My voice is going up and I am shouting, maybe sometimes happens. So that's
okay. Carla, what are the symptoms? What happens when you are distressed?
Usually I will have physical symptoms first. I'll feel my heart rate change. The muscles start to go tense in my body. Usually my neck and back and shoulders begin to hurt. And usually my behavior starts to change as well. So I'll be ranting a little bit, talking too much, not making sense, complaining, going over the same problem over and over again, and things like that. Yeah, that's my typical response when I'm in a state of distress, especially if it's something like what Mikhail just said about my surroundings or other people's behavior. That will usually trigger that cascade of, events.
Okay. Because if we think about well-being, we can think about short-term well-being and long-term well-being, right? So there can be some situations that happens in the short term, and we are very hot in this time. So it's completely different than the long term of distress, the long-term distress, right? So probably it's very difficult to get into this short term and tell people how they should behave in an appropriate way, because it's impossible, because we are all hot there, and there is action and there is reaction, right? But if we are thinking about this long-term well-being, maybe our amplitude can be a bit lower in those short-term issues. What do you think about this this concept that I have thought about just right now?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I must say I think that consistently neglecting short-term cues is what leads to this cumulative long-term. It almost becomes a habitual psychological space. It's the origin of depression, anxiety, rage, and chronic kind of behavioral things, and it tends to become a self-perpetuating cycle. And really, this is the space that, from a medical perspective, you would look at kind of, okay, a psychologist, etc., to help you change pattern behavior, cognitive behavioral therapy. But really, at the end of the day, I think it does boil down to awareness, mindfulness, if you want to call it that. So becoming more conscious of your own responses, your own actions, what emerges in you as you start to have certain emotions, and learning the coping techniques and learning the strategies to address those consistently and well, and move into a space of longer term well-being. And I loved what Michael had to say. So I must say we've done quite a lot of work around well-being over this time of COVID in our organization and working with our community, and a real attention paid to what is it as human beings that we require for our well-being. And it really boils down when we asked many people in our community, what is helping you to feel well at this point? And almost without fail, there were three consistent responses, which were family, particularly my spouse, but family, the connection to my family, the connection to faith. So being connected to faith, God, being connected on a spiritual level, whatever that was,
okay,
and the connection to nature. And I think the power of stories, Michael, is that stories facilitate connection. And as human beings, we sometimes lose connection, but we need to become mindful and have techniques to bring ourselves back into the connections with the things that matter most for us, in order to preserve our long-term well-being. Because we can always cope in the short term, but we often forget that many, many short terms become habits, become our long-term destiny.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Michał?
Yeah, I would like to just to continue what Robin said, that this connection is an essential, I think, path we can think of when we build our goals in life, because very often we prepare some plans for our daily life without thinking about this connection. But we can start the day with a meditation of, what we should do and how we can connect throughout the day, of, how we can connect with different parts of our, like we say, nature, friends, people we are going to meet. So this is a very essential part of how to discover the well-being throughout the day. And Wojtek mentioned about this, like long-term well-being and short-term well-being. If you think about your plan of the day, and you think, okay, how I can connect with different things, and I have to do with different people throughout the day. So then we can plan this daily well-being. And of course, we see if we can fulfill that or not. And we think about experiences, what type of experiences we can design throughout the day, which can strengthen our well-being.
Mm-hmm. And what do you, because you haven't mentioned, Robin, work or anything connected with the things that we are about to do. So why it's not there?
Do you want to answer, Carla? So work can go either way, because I think work, when we are disconnected to our purpose, is a huge stress, or a huge source of additional stress. It means that we are engaging daily, regularly, for many hours a day in something that's not igniting us inside, and it kills our soul. So our work, and it's a strange thing, because often it can be the same work, but how you approach it that differs. If we can understand and see the value and the meaning in our work, there's something very powerful about speaking into your own sense of purpose through your work that enhances your well-being. And if I can just quickly give a quick example, we have, obviously, South Africa has a huge problem with unemployment, huge problem. And we have a group of people in our country, and I'm sure you have similar, but for us, it's a profession almost, who are waste pickers. They pick waste. They recycle waste. And so many people would feel that this is a job without, prestige and value. But if you speak to the waste pickers, they value their work because they see themselves as cleaning the city and as cleaning the planet. And despite the fact that it's kind of seen as a menial task, actually, even in that space, there's a possibility to speak to your own sense of value and purpose on this earth. So I don't know if that adequately answers kind of what you were wanting to say, but I think we need to be conscious of making our work intentionally something that feeds into the best of us, and that we can be briefly stressed, but the purpose of our work needs to actually lead to our sense of greater well-being.
Mm-hmm. Carla, do you agree? Would you like to add something to this?
Absolutely, that I agree with that, definitely, Robin. And what I would say is, I think the word is joy, isn't it? When your work gives you a feeling of joy, there are always going to, it doesn't matter what work you choose, there are always going to be days when the pressure is higher, whether that's because you've got a deadline or you've taken on a new challenge, or, it's just something is happening that's outside of your control. But when the work that you've chosen gives you a feeling of joy in general in your life, you'll be able to keep that balance between that stress, that Robin mentioned, that good stress that is necessary for life, and you'll be able to ignite yourself with that passion, and just make sure that you're less likely to overdo it because it's balanced by joy. And also it's meeting needs. I love that, Robin, you also mentioned about the individual aspect of well-being, because it is different for everyone, and that connects to our work, but it also connects to our wider set of needs. And definitely for adults, our work fits a need, sometimes many needs. So it's not something that we can remove from our lives in order to increase our well-being, but we just need to find a way to balance it, with all of our other needs and with joy.
Mm-hmm. And yes, Michał?
I would like to add about this difficult task we can perform during the day, or unhappy or unpleasant task we have to do. I would like to mention about Mother Teresa, who did a really tremendous work of helping other people. She really cleaned people with smell, bad smell, and did a lot, had these experiences of, but however, she and the sisters always have joy of doing that. It's incredible. I met this sister from Mother Teresa, and they were really overjoyed all the time performing their daily work.
Mm-hmm. So sense of purpose is a key word, key two words here, right? And what do you think about self-esteem? So being true about yourself, knowing your values, and knowing what you introduce into the society that you live in, that you work in.
You go, Carla.
Yeah. This is something that I think about a lot, actually, in my work, especially with children, because quite often you see how important their self-esteem is in their sense of well-being. but very much, especially when they get to the age that I work with at the moment, which is kind of like the 12, 13 age, where everything is changing inside them, and outside the world starts to become a completely different place to them. And this is when their self-esteem and their sense of who they are and what they're going to do in the world becomes really important. And I think this is where we start to really understand the importance of the well-being of the adults around them. Because when the adults, namely the teachers, are not in a state of well-being, or their parents, this makes their journey through the teen years all that more difficult. You know, because they're in this state of imbalance this is by nature. You know, it's not that something's wrong with them. It's just a natural process that they go through. But when they're surrounded by adults who are overworked, have lost their sense of purpose, forgotten what it feels like to experience joy, it just makes life so much more challenging for young people. And I think that that's why it really is a big thing to me, because I've seen that, you know, the importance of that in my everyday work time and time again. And you see how much, even in the world today, a lot of our young people are, you know, suffering from depression, you know, high levels of stress, much more than some people say than in the past. I mean, we don't know because we're living now. We didn't live in the past, but I think a lot of that is compounded by the problems that adults have with their well-being in general.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's very important, very visible in the sports. You can see some football players that are exceptional, and they go into other society where there is some other big star, and their self-esteem goes down and their performance goes deeply, deeply down. I've seen when I was watching my children playing football in the team, they had a very good player in their team. So I've seen all of them just taking all the pressure from themselves and giving back the ball to this boy. And if you're watching FC Barcelona, you can see the same happens where everybody plays to Messi. So their self-esteem goes out when they have this this person with much higher level, and they're a bit, let's say, intimidated by this person. Okay.
Yeah, I think that goes down to our limited view of greatness. I think that in society now we have an imbalance when it comes to what we view as great, and it's exaggerated. So unless you're a superstar at the top of your game, you're not great, and that's the message that we filter down to children. You know, and they grow up with those self-esteem issues because they're comparing themselves to somebody who's extremely talented, or somebody who, you know, is rare amongst humans, or somebody who's put in lots of effort to hone their skills and develop their natural talents, and they are often misguided into thinking that they should just jump up one day and be that amazing, and then if they're not, they suffer, you know. And I think also sometimes we see in society a confusion between high self-esteem and a big ego. And this is common, you know, in fame, we see like huge egos, and people mistake that for self-esteem, and they try to kind of emulate that or imitate it. And when they can't, that also makes them feel that they are, you know, they don't have high self-esteem. So I think it's very delicate balance there between, you know, high self-esteem and ego. And we have to be careful how we nurture that, what messages we give with regards to success and how amazing people can be, because actually all of us are amazing and have an amazing potential, and all that needs to happen is we need the tools and the support to bring that out.
And there is different time when it's when we can see our true talents. Robin was
I think Michael is wanting to say something desperately.
I want to add, because you mentioned sport people, but I would like to add point of view of an artist and creative people. And as an artist, very often I have very low self-esteem of my work I do, because when you have a lot in your imagination, you would like to do a lot of things, and when you see the result, it's never the same when it is this. It's not the same like in your dreams. So very often I can feel unhappy at this moment when I see the result of my work. Yeah. So many creative people, I think they have this low esteem of their output.
Mm. So I would really love to just jump in, and I think there are a couple of comments that have come up on the chat box that are really, really relevant. So Ursula's comment that no matter what your work is, it doesn't diminish your value as a human being. And then Thomas's comment about the fact that, you know, worth, we are, and I agree, Carla. I actually think it is worse now, because I think our adults, you said it earlier, but our adults are stressed. The pace is much higher, and that's why attending to adult well-being is so important, because actually they are they're kind of the voice piece of society to children, and this message of conditionality. So your self-worth is based on something, as opposed to, you know, the unconditional self-valuing of self, for yourself, your uniqueness, who you are, without needing to do anything to prove or show it, but just that unconditional high regard that you are held in by the adults in your life, who do not look to see what you're producing, but look to see the potential within you. That's what adults need to give our children, and they can't do it when they're in their own space of low self-esteem, high stress, anger, irritability, etc. So you know, personally, I've always said, if there is only one gift I want to give my own children, and it's a high self-esteem. And that doesn't mean brash and out there. It doesn't mean projecting, I'm so great. It means this inner sense of, I am enough just as I am. I am unique, and what I bring has value. And I think this is partly also, you know, where faith does play such a big role for that sense that I am just as I am enough. The stuff I do, that's fantastic and wonderful, but it doesn't make me a better or a worse person. And at the end of the day, in terms of our adults' behavior and in terms of our children, I think things that really increase the levels of self-esteem in children is when we operate from a conscious basis of respect and kindness. Respect and kindness. If you make a mistake, I will still treat you with respect and kindness. And that speaks to your value as a person, despite whatever you've done.
I would definitely agree with that, Robin. And I think that as adults, we can't do that with children until we do it with ourselves. When we say to ourselves, I am enough as I am, and whatever I do is just extra, you know. When we say to ourselves, I'm here in this world for a reason, and that's enough in itself, and I'm just doing the rest for the fun of the experience. And when we say to ourselves, oh, I make mistakes, that's part of this journey, and that doesn't mean anything about my value or my worth unless I don't acknowledge and learn from those mistakes. But when I acknowledge and learn from those mistakes, that's it, that's enough. Then we can do that with our children. It becomes almost instinctive. You know, we never stop and think after the few days when our children begin to take their first steps, we never really think about how they learn to walk, because it's just a given. It's instinctive, isn't it? And that would be the same with well-being. If we just instinctively accepted that view of well-being and that view of ourself in terms of our value, it would just instinctively happen with our children as well. But what we see at the moment is the opposite of that quite often. So that instinctive beating ourselves up and questioning our worth and, you know, saying that we need to be more and we'll be happy when, you know, life will start when I do this, and I'll be good enough when I do that. That becomes an instinctive, like you mentioned earlier, it's that pattern of behavior. And then that becomes what we give to our children. And quite often it's all done unconsciously. So I love that comment.
What do you think about, I'm sorry, I was gone, but something happened to my computer. But I see that you work really well without me. So what do you think about such an hypothesis? Naming an issue naming some problem can help us in dealing with this issue. Yes, Robin?
I think it goes again to the consciousness, because if you don't make an effort to name something, it's easier to suppress it. But the act of looking for the name for it, and it goes back again to Michael's, the storytelling. It helps you see the story you are telling yourself. As you name something, you start to see it as outside of you, and therefore that you are telling a story about it. When we neglect to consciously name the things we're experiencing, we start to think they are us, if they're an emotion or whatever it is. And that ability, that metacognition, so the ability to stand and look at my own thinking, helps us to shift our own thinking. So whether it's, you know, journaling and writing and actually just naming it or speaking, our words have power, because they give us something to work with, as opposed to this nebulous, well, there's stuff happening, but I'm not prepared to look at it.
Okay, because I was thinking that if we don't name it, the fear grows. But if we will name it, then we are starting to solve those problems that we have named. So our attitude is to overcoming this thing that we have named.
And of course, we connect with this good or bad side of the reality when we name something, when we describe something in a positive way or we describe something in a negative way immediately. And that's amazing to perceive the child, because Carla mentioned about it. I mentioned about children, you know, how we perceive the children and their, for instance, mistakes, or we should perceive children in a completely different way, not looking at mistakes, but looking at this potential and trying to grow this potential every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we have a very big issue concerning the educational system, because it happened for the time being that many people think about themselves, hey, what am I here on this world for? I've noticed that my work is just sending a couple of emails and that's it. I don't introduce much to this society. At the beginning of the pandemic, of the lockdown in our country, I was thinking, hey, I have to do something with myself. So I've started broadcasting, and I was thinking, okay, so that helps me. And I was saying it aloud every time, that it helps me because I can see that I'm here for something, that my work is worth something. But many people will start to perceive that their students don't want to talk to them. Then they don't want to connect to them. Or even if they are connected, they do many other things apart from learning school things. Carla, do you have similar things in your school? How it happens?
For me, one of the first things that I said when we had a discussion about this with colleagues is that now is when teachers are really going to know what kind of relationship they've had with their students the whole year. And quite often we think that bodies in the room as teachers means we have attention. And because we can't see what's going on inside their heads, we think that they're with us, but often they're somewhere else. And again, that goes down to something Robin mentioned earlier about just that sense of being, I can't remember the word, but sort of detached and not aware. You know, when you're not aware, your body can be one place, you know, and your mind be somewhere else. And that's very often true when we're not in a state of well-being. And again, with teachers, if you got to this point where you were teaching online during the pandemic and you felt like your students were not with you, they probably haven't been with you throughout the year. Or even if they were with you throughout the year, this situation that they were presented with meant that they weren't in a state of well-being and they weren't able to be with you and focus on that learning, you know. And there are so many factors that interfere, and actually people can't learn. You know, and I know, Robin, also you mentioned something about this earlier, that people can't learn when they're not in a state of well-being. They can't engage, you know. And during this time, a lot of parents have been in a state of fear and anxiety, and that would have been transferred and projected quite often in the home and to the children. And they can't, you know, engage with learning. Children are natural learners. It's instinctive in them. And so when it's switched off, you know, when they're not engaging and they're not learning, there's usually something significant that's happening to interrupt that natural state, you know, and to take them out of that. So, yeah, I think these times are very telling for the education system, and the children will show us exactly what they thought of it before the pandemic and what they think of it now.
Robin, what do you think? Because there appeared a comment. The reality might appear too terrifying. Sometimes it seems better to escape, to close it at the bottom of one's heart.
So thank you. So I also saw that comment, and I think this is the thing with fear. Fear grows in an environment of unknowing. So what we imagine is almost always worse than the worst possible thing that could happen. As soon as we can name and see something, we can deal with it, even if it's terrible. So, you know, if you try this with anybody in your world, you say to them, I've got something really terrible I need to tell you, and then just stop and don't tell them. You will watch their imagination take over, and they will think, what could it be? It must be awful. What if it's this? What if it's my, you know, what if she's got cancer? What if she's got this? What if she's going to die? What if my child's died in a car accident? And the ramifications of fear are myriad. It can take over your mind. But as soon as you name something, you can deal with it. And I can tell you, so I was in practice for 17 years as a family medicine, family doctor. And I had many cases where referring doctors would not have told somebody the diagnosis of what they had, and they had something quite terrible. And to me, it was the unkindest thing that you could do, because you deny them the information, and therefore they cannot deal with it, and they are consumed by fear. And in this environment with our children as well, when we promote fear without concretizing it, we cut their legs from out from under them. So what they're left with is fear, and not how can I approach this terrible thing that's happening. We fail to equip them. And life is like this. So, you know, it's the same as breeding a fear of mistakes. Teach your children to love mistakes. They're wonderful, because when you make a mistake, what a learning opportunity. But when we breed in them, you have to be afraid of getting anything wrong, of something going wrong. Your life has to be perfect, or it's not good enough. You kill the spirit of your children, and you kill your own spirit when you also behave like that.
Mm-hmm. You touched the very important issue of fear, but where does the key fear comes from the story, from narration we are telling ourselves. And in this time of coronavirus, we can live fear, but also we can see opportunities around us we can do. And I observe, and also I studied many stories appearing now, and there are many hero stories. So people who act as a hero, and they don't act by fear, but they act by the possibilities they can do for others. And I see many stories, I can observe many stories of really wonderful actions toward other people and the community. And this is what I am looking for, these positive stories. And it gives me hope that in this time or terrible situation, we can really find well-being inside us, and we can share with others.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes there is something that we have an issue. For example, somebody is sick, and we don't talk about it at the beginning, but then it grows, it grows, it grows, and in our mind it grows, it grows, it grows. So is there any bad time when you shouldn't talk about something, or you can change your mind and make people more informed anytime in this timeline?
So it's an interesting thing. We spoke before we started about this constellations work, and constellations in terms of relationships. It's work for families, but actually it applies to organizations, it applies to anything where there are relationships at play. And the truth is, particularly, so let's talk about families. Family secrets are always known, particularly by children. They might not know the details, but they know there is a secret. And when we don't speak about, when we avoid, when we don't speak about it, when we kind of refuse to bring it in, they know at a visceral level that something is not right. The bigger it is, the worse it is. And so we co-opt the whole family into keeping our secret because we can't speak about it. And it puts tremendous strain on our children because they have to step into a protector role where they don't speak about the secret because mommy would be too upset or dad would be, you know. And so we create a storyline that is a storyline. And what Mikhail says is so true, that the story we tell ourselves becomes our reality. And our reality is completely capable of changing depending on how we tell our story, because there's the real event, there's our perception and the story we tell. There's somebody else's perception and the story they tell. And the truth isn't in the story, it lies somewhere else. And we can change our story and so see things differently. But this kind of thing about when do you talk about stuff, you obviously are sensitive, but it's less so when do we talk about it and more how do we talk about it. Because if it's in a family situation, if I am as an adult, I'm overwhelmed by fear because I haven't processed it myself, then when I tell that story, I'm transmitting fear. And we can deal with very difficult issues in a way that is constructive and grows and creates the opportunity for growth and coping.
And is there, maybe Carla could answer, any good time or bad time to change our mind? So let's say we weren't talking about the possible death of our family member, but we can change our mind and say, okay, children, come and let's talk to each other, because the more it's closer to this process, to death, the worst it is to start the conversation. But if we don't start the conversation early enough, maybe these children won't have time to say goodbye. So is there some...
Yeah, I think Robin mentioned earlier about in the times and the importance in general in well-being of faith, and just like your spiritual beliefs. And I think that when you have like strong values in something greater, you know, a sense of purpose or some kind of faith, that can really help with things like that, you know, and I think, again, this emphasizes why it's so important to have well-being at the core of every day, like Michael mentioned also. You need well-being to be a habit on a daily basis so that you stay mostly in a state of balance and well-being. Why? Because life is always going to throw these things at you, these big things that you're not going to be in control of. And this happens to everybody. And the amazing thing about children is that quite often we're worrying about them and how they're going to react, but actually it's ourselves that we need to be thinking about first, because children are great at dealing with crisis if you watch them. Until adults teach them the wrong ways to tell stories about, you know, what we perceive as negative things, they're very matter of fact. And they are quite often the ones that will lead the process of having a healthy discussion and healing, you know, because they live in the moment and they understand things instinctively that we've forgotten, you know. I often think of children as being much closer to the source. A lot of people will say, you know, they're fresh from heaven. If you're a religious person, you might put it that way. But they are closer to the real nature of the human than adults. Quite often we've lost our way. And when we discuss things, we just need to open this discussion. And then quite often they will take it in the direction that it needs to go in for it to be a healthy discussion and for it to be resolved much quicker. I think sometimes we underestimate children and we forget that we can learn more from them in dealing with difficult situations in life, such as death, such as sickness, you know, and even the current situation we see in the world. If you discuss it with a group of 5-year-olds, they'll give you some very healthy conversation and some guidance about how to deal with and overcome, you know, really difficult situations or what we as adults might perceive to be difficult. So I think we need to bear that in mind, you know, and trust children and just be honest. Just say something to start the discussion and then go with it, you know, let it develop organically.
I think it's very similar in the situation that we have right now with coronavirus. As a society, we are not sure if we are well informed. There are many different types of statistics that comes into our informational bubbles. And if we feel that we are uninformed, we are more prone to some kind of more extraordinary possibilities that happens. That it can be. We are more prone to fake news concerning this issue. So it's the same with children, right? And we are not stable with the information that we have. We feel frightened because it's big. So it takes our well-being away from us, right?
Yeah, I think this is the thing. It's disempowering, and that's you know, the less information you have, the more you look for any information you can find. And if, you know, it's no good also presenting information without presenting choice. So, you know, if you are being bombarded by a lot of negative information and your sense is that all you are able to do is receive it, but you're not empowered to manage it or respond in any way, it's hugely disempowering, and it leads to despair, actually, because you feel, well, this thing is coming and there's nothing I can do. And so the same when sharing bad news, it's actually, the news is one thing, but there is a moment of empowerment of talking about, and how can we choose to respond to that news, and what are the things that we can do to, with COVID, for instance, what is the stuff that you can do, and actually examine what is the worst that could happen. And if the worst were to happen, we would still be able to make choices afterwards and move on. It's yeah.
And also, also it's important to mention that the fears are very easy to transmit to children, and we as adults should be we're responsible to transmit to young generation our fears. And their children are very sensitive. They're more sensitive than even adults. They're like sponges which take everything from adults. So if adults are in fear, so immediately children takes that from parents. So we have to be aware of that, what we transmit to other around us. And especially also we can think about school situation where teachers are coming to school and they're coming with fears, we're not happy. What can they transmit to children?
So I think that some kind of stability is also a case for the time being, because for the previous 3 months, we have switched our entire education or our entire world upside down. So it's a thing that we have to get used to. We have to learn new norms of communication. Sometimes we have to learn new skills to earn money, and it's important for many adults. Children have to get used to other type of education, where it's more on their own responsibility than on the responsibility of teachers who push them forward, right?
Yeah, I think this has been a great time actually in terms of redefining the boundaries when it comes to education, because actually the responsibility of the education of a child is first and foremost with their parents. And the child is the one that's in charge of the learning. They are the learner. And for a long time, it seemed like both learning and the education responsibility have been with the schools and with teachers. And that's gone to the extreme, I would say, in recent years. Quite often to the point that the child's well-being as a learner is really damaged, you know, because they're in the hands of teachers. And often in a lot of places, like, for example, here where I work, when you work overseas, there's like this regular turnover of teachers. So children are continually having different teachers every year. You know, they're shifting schools, they're shifting classes, and there's no ownership, you know, because the parents have basically been disempowered, you know, which is a word we also used earlier. They've been disempowered. They've lost their self-esteem, you know, as parents quite often, and given up their responsibility and their rights as the educator of their children to schools that are often overworked, you know, under too much pressure, and teachers that are just stressed out because they have the burden of all of this education of children, and also all of the other issues that they face. So in this time, having the children back in the homes has given the parents a chance to really reflect, you know, and to see how much goes into educating children, but also to take back, I think, some of their power. And I've seen parents having discussions now like, wow, is this what my kid's learning? I don't want my kid to learn this. Or, you know, why are they doing so much math and not enough, you know, of other subjects? Parents are asking questions now around subjects such as art and creativity and where that's gone from some of the curriculums, and why, you know, their children are reading these books we were still reading when we were at school. Why haven't the books changed? You know, now they're engaging in discussions that are very, very important, not only for education but for well-being. And I think this has been one of the positives that's come out of the shift that's happened, you know, to online learning and to children being at home, because parents are often at work and disconnected from their children for so long that they don't know what's really going on with their education. And that plays a big role, you know, in the imbalance of children and parents and society well-being.
Yeah. Funny thing about books, there is a big issue in Poland right now, because parents and teachers want to get out from the curriculum a book that was very racist. It's about children who were in Africa and they had slaves and so on. So really terrible book. And now when adults hear everything what happens in those books, they ask themselves, oh my God, why? and so a great issue. And what do you think about competition? Because competition is also a great issue that hinders our well-being. And for the time being, especially in the online world, where we can see other teachers that do great stuff, and we are asking ourselves, oh my God, they have nice teachers, and what happens to our teachers? So sometimes teachers get scared because they are compared to other that we can see online. But also it's with children, they are very scared if they are compared to each other. Competition in sports, it's cutting their wings off, right? And in Aspire, it's something about wings, right?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead. I'll come in after.
I think competition is part of the same conversation as mistakes. It comes from the same philosophical framework. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong. Somebody's better and that means somebody's worse. And I think, you know, our way of thinking about our systems has to change, because, and it actually, what's so exciting is it is changing, because competition is actually, there are a series of models looking at the way societies work, and they basically move through 1.0, which is severely hierarchical, 2.0, which is competition based, and it's basically capitalism, you know, the world order of capitalism, 3.0, which is stakeholder networking, and 4.0, which is where I hope that we are going, which is around the ecosystem creation and co-creation and generative thinking. And generative thinking loves mistakes, and whatever competition there is only regarded as feeding into the better information of the whole group. And I just think, you know, we sit at this point right now with this incredible opportunity. We have been speaking for so long about the need for 21st century skills, for creative competencies, and yet we keep teaching skills that are based in a system that is really busy dying around competition and mistakes and who's right and who's wrong. And there's this huge opportunity now to help our children see that when we are able to, and children naturally want to do this, when we work together, we are all much happier and things work much better. Yeah, so competition has a healthy place. It's not to say there's no place for it, but the place for it isn't around destroying people's self-value and self-worth. It's around creating more capability because we push ourselves a bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
So competition is part of our life, but of course we need to not forget about connections and to see competition as a part of connected world, an interconnected world. I lived for 3 years in Japan, and Japan has developed this amazing system of connection and collaboration. And even if they compete each other, they don't want to destroy each other. They see interrelation, and it's amazing because, for instance, I was working in a company, and there was they had economical crisis in 97, and we our company, Japanese company, collaborate with many different companies, and the company in trouble came to my company to ask for help. They asked for money, and the president of my company said, okay, I gave them $100,000 to help them. It just gave as a gift, because if they are destroyed, so we cannot collaborate with them. So I think the American approach is completely different, because they try to, you know, there's like competition for killing. They don't care of each other. But in Japan, they care each other. So I think it's like healthy competition. When we care of others, it's very important. And if we build it at school from this, or in family at the beginning also. So if we grew up with this environment of learning of healthy competition, I think we are really building a new world.
Carla, would you follow the thought?
Yeah, and I would say, having worked with children for so many years, I see that this is not a natural trait in children. I had a story a few months ago, actually, when my son was playing baseball, and we're originally from the UK, and so we don't play baseball in the UK, and he just got into it here in Doha when he was watching videos on YouTube and decided he wanted to try baseball. So we took him to the American school to practice, you know, and to take part. And he was playing for a couple of seasons. And at the end of the last season, I remember an incident where they played their hearts out, both teams, and they'd gone into this huge competition that the adults had arranged, and, you know, big food and this and flyers and all sorts of arrangements. And the children just saw a play opportunity. And it was funny because at the end, children from both teams were running up to their parents and saying, who won? They had no idea who won. And it was after the fact, after they'd ate their snacks and they'd played with each other and they practiced and all of that, then they suddenly realized that, oh yeah, it was a competition and somebody won. And it was both teams, you know, and that just showed that they really didn't care. And I've had the same situation many times with the boys in school, you know, when we'll ask them what's happening in a competition and which team's ahead and things like that. And some of the boys will know, you know, the ones who are very competitive, but a lot of them have no idea who's winning, who's first or anything like that. They're actually just there to enjoy the experience and have fun. And that, again, is another example that we find in children all over the world that's very different from adults, you know, and from the message that adults are given that, you know, it's this dog-eat-dog world and there's one place at the top and we're all climbing on each other to get there in every industry, which is just, again, it's just another story that we're told by some people to promote that agenda so that they can get what they want, you know, which is people running all over each other over, you know, something that's just an illusion. You know, how much more fun life is when you're only competing with you to be better than you were yesterday, you know?
Yeah, I actually that's spot on, because I wanted to say that competition is there and it's normal and children do compete, but competition is an element of a game. It's part of a play, and I think it circles right round back to self-esteem. So when your self-esteem is high, you can have a competition, but you still value the person on the other side. And the competition is just a thing you're doing together. You kind of playing together around it, but that you still respect and value the other person. And I think where we've gone wrong is as and I think it all comes back to what my self-esteem is, because if my self-esteem is low and I think that I have to win in order to boost my self-esteem, and you have to lose for me to win to boost my self-esteem, then it becomes dog eat dog. And I love your Japan example, because I think this is exactly it. When you compete in a culture of respect, your competitor is not your enemy. They're somebody that you're engaged in a game with, even if it's at a corporate level. You know, you're engaged in Monopoly with big money, but it's still a game you're playing, and I can still respect your humanity and value it.
Well, the foundation that I have made is called EDU-klaster, because cluster is some kind of cooperative initiative that competitive companies can have greater value because they are together. So when you are together with the competing companies, all the branch grows, so you have bigger cake with much more icing on it, right? So if there is a bigger cake, everybody can eat from it. But if we are fighting each other, so we are taking the icing away. So our cake is very small, and we don't have. So we have to fight each other for the small parts that are left. So cooperating in competitive companies is pretty good thing, because we all can grow together. Okay, I was thinking the last issue that I would like to raise is consistency in our children. If our approach to children, because you have mentioned that we are seeing our children and they are doing things that we don't want them to do, or we are thinking, okay, it's so stupid. Why they're doing so much math? Why they're not doing arts? Why they're listening to it? We are sometimes listening to the lectures of their teachers, and we are thinking, oh my God, why? Why on earth has he got to hear this for 45 minutes, for 1.5 hours? Why? So we are not, we have to make a decision. How do we communicate with our children? So do we tell them, okay, I understand you, it's boring. But what happens in the mind of this child? He thinks, okay, my father, my mother thinks that it's boring. So it's boring. So it's not for me. Maybe I will play a computer game in the same time while the lecture goes. So how to help children in being consistent with each other? Do you have any idea about this really big issue?
I think it goes back to the purpose conversation, and the fact that the work you do is not always wonderful, but if you understand the purpose behind it, you're able to get through the harder bits of it. And I must say, I think there's some instances in which the work really is boring, and we should be telling them it's boring. And of course, you know, because if I can't capture, is it the child's fault that the teacher is unable to capture their imagination? I mean, we see it a lot. We've got a subject called life orientation, which should be the most amazing subject, and yet it is taught so terribly, you know. And the thing is, I think there are moments when you can acknowledge with your child, you know what, it is boring. Sorry. You know, let me suggest you add some spice to it and learn some other stuff that's more interesting. But you can also then paint the bigger picture and say, it is boring, but it's a subject you have to pass if you want to go on to the next thing. And so if your child is able to visualize their future passion, and they can see, this is not the whole thing, but this is something I need to do. It's a stepping stone to walk. Then I can do it. You know, it's like doing it's like when you have a baby and you have to clean their nappy. You can't not clean it. It's something you have to do, but it doesn't mean that you can't still love that, you know, do a nasty job within an environment where actually you've got a much bigger purpose. Yeah. And I think it really is about how you position to your children. Don't tell them they shouldn't find it boring, because if it's boring, it's boring.
But what happens if you don't believe in this long-term process? Then the problem is bigger.
Then what you fail to do is you fail to recognize the inherent potential in your child, because and that is when we force children who hate school or who hate academics, and we don't offer them, we don't look for what their potential and what their love is. And so we can't offer them any reason for why they're having to go through this thing that they hate. We've lost the point of education. Education is not to force as much information into a child's head as possible. It's to ignite their potential. And that's what a great teacher does. They look for the potential.
Okay.
And everybody has this potential. So the question is also on what we concentrate. And if we concentrate on this positive side, so it will be really ignition of this child's possibility capacity. That's the most important, to concentrate on positive side, and then emerges amazing stuff from everybody. And also the approach, because if you say it's boring, also it spreads negative energy around you. Because I think everything is interesting. And if we have approach, even, you know, we can clean something or do some unpleasant things, and it's interesting and you're fascinating. So just to taking out of your life and your mind these uninteresting things. So it means you are doing interesting things. It doesn't mean you change the actions, but you do the same actions with a completely different approach.
Okay, Carla, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I would definitely say that some things are boring, and I think that's just the acknowledgement of how you're experiencing the thing. And I think that if we acknowledge that when children say this is boring, what they're actually saying is that not this is boring, but I'm experiencing this as it is boring. And I think we can differentiate, you know, for children between something being factually boring, because actually what you may find boring, I often say this to my son, well, no, because some people find it interesting, you know, so it's not that it is boring, it's that you are bored by it, you know, and that's okay. I think that we also have one danger if we lose our balance in the world with children, is that we feed them the image that everything in the world has to be amazing. That everything has to, I saw a comment there about play-based learning in the chat from Karima. Play-based learning is amazing when it comes to certain subjects. And it teaches children so much, and also gives them a sense of joy and taps into that natural instinct that they have to play and learn at the same time. But there is a point in learning where something cannot be playful. It is serious. You know, some subjects, especially as you get older, they do become more academic. And again, that taps into something that Robin said, which is about the long-term goals that children then begin to develop for themselves, you know, in their lives, and where this learning fits into those long-term goals. And then there's a point at which you may need to break past the point of boredom in order to achieve that goal. you know. And if we continually feed this idea to our children that everything should be fun and it should be play and it should be interesting, I think we also can do some damage to their well-being long term, because they will then begin to think that if they're not finding everything fun and playful, that there's something wrong with them. And that's not necessarily true. There are some topics that are boring and they're meant to be, because they're not play. You know, it's got to a serious point. It's now become very academic, a lot of reading involved, a lot of writing. And if you haven't got what it takes to get past that, then it's probably not the thing for you. And that's important also, to let children know that, okay, maybe this subject isn't something that you'll pursue later, but you might need to do it now, you know. But also something that someone brought up to me and asked me this question, a parent in these teaching online days, was how can parents help when teachers are making lessons that are very boring unnecessarily, or they're very repetitive, or there's too much lecturing. And I think parents have to be confident to approach teachers and schools and say, you know, I think that this is not really working, you know, and there are different ways that you can do that. If you have, for example, teachers that are talking for more minutes than a child is old, if your child is 9 and the teacher is talking for longer than 9-10 minutes, they're already breaking what's known as good practice in education. Because most people's attention span, even adults, doesn't go, you know, past 10 minutes of the same person talking without stopping. So you can approach schools, you know, as a parent and teachers and say, make suggestions, and just express how you're feeling about the learning experience that your child is having. And, you know, by all means, tell them about the impact that it's having on your child and their attitude to learning, because that's something that teachers should care about. They should care about how their lesson is being perceived and how it's affecting children's attitude to their learning. And if it's a detrimental impact, as a teacher, that's part of your responsibility to address that also. But I think sometimes parents, again, they lack self-esteem, and they think because they're not the educator that they can't say, hey, teacher, those lessons are not very good, but they can, because they are the experts in their child's learning at the end of the day, you know?
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's nice statistic that you have said that number of minutes should be equal to to the age of a person. So luckily, we are having a webinar that is directed to 2-year-olds. So it's a good one. Okay, so nice. Okay. Can we go into some conclusions? Could you tell us something, maybe in the first thing, is there anything that you would like to underline the most from your from the things that you have said earlier on? And the second question is there anything that happened today that probably put your mind into some weird direction, or gave you some good reflection that you would like to mull over next time, or farther on at your home to think about things that we were talking about? So reflection and underlying of the most important aspect that you have said.
So I'll kick off.
Okay.
So in terms of reflection, I think 2 things, really some interesting prompting of thought about the role of competition, and how it needs to be balanced with really healthy sense of play and self-esteem. And then also just a reminder of the power of stories. So we think the stories we tell ourselves are our reality, but they are stories and we can change them. So even if our smallest power we can't change the external environment. We still have the power to change the story we tell ourselves about what we are facing, and that's a big power. And then in term, for me, always my underlining thought is always the biggest thing, the biggest gift we can give our children is a healthy self-esteem. And the most important ways of engaging with others are with respect and kindness. And if we stick to those, it's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, I will follow that with it. I'd like to emphasize, you know, from the things that I've spoke about this evening is just the importance of adults putting their own well-being first. There is no child well-being without adult well-being. It's a mistake that adults often make when they say, okay, I'm going to make sure the children are okay. If a teacher is saying first thing is to make sure the students are okay, it's wrong. And the same with parents. If first is to make sure the kids are okay, that's also wrong. You have to be okay first. You have to have your own well-being under control, and you have to have the habits and routines that are necessary for your needs to be met consistently so that you can be in a state of well-being. And then you can help children. You can take care of children, and you know, you can support them to be the best that they can be. And in terms of daily reflections and things that have happened, I think it's always either my students or my son or my daughter that gives me something each day. And a few years ago, I think I noticed that children are our guides more than we are theirs. And so there's always some bit of wisdom that I will get from them each day. And I think today I definitely got from my son just the saying what you want when you want it. Which is something that children do every single day with no shame, you know. So I think that as an adult, I'm still learning that, and I'm learning it from the kids around me, is when I want something or need something, I just say it in a calm and respectful way, and everybody around me will understand that that connects to my well-being. So that's a habit that I'm picking up and learning from the children around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to share one reflection about perception, that well-being is all about perception of everything around us, and first of all ourselves. And throughout changing this perception or developing these perceptions, we can develop or change, transform our feelings and our state of well or bad being. And looking at you and your smiles, it's very encouraging for me. And I think it's very important to give this smile every day, sharing this smile to everybody around us.
Mm-hmm. And what about me? First of all, I'm sorry for my language stiffness. It's the first time I do live in English here on this fan page, and I haven't been talking in English for so long with other people, so I have to get used to it, and I have to lose the stiffness of it. So firstly, I'm sorry for this. The second of all, for me, the most important things were issues were the competition. Last year, I was on the conference where there was a lecture of Alficon. Are you familiar with him? He's talking about world without competition. For me, it's a great picture, a great story. When I was running, and I was trying to be the fastest from the whole family, and there was my son who was 12 years old, and the other was 10 years old, and the daughter is 4-year-old. And it happens that I'm the fastest. But when I go and run very, very fast and I turn around, I can see that they stop and they don't want to compete with me because they see that I'm so far away from them that the competition is useless. So competition in that manner doesn't give them any motivation because they're on they're very far away from me. So and this picture reminds me about an issue of competition that it breaks our well-being. It ruins our motivation. Unless we try to cheat and we run slower. But then, okay, we are not true with our children, with what we are doing. And it also leads to some not wanted things. So competition is the first issue that we have to face. And I think that naming the problems is very important. Being informed as humans, as a society, as children. If we are well informed, then we can solve problems. We are aware of what happens around us. Telling our fears aloud or writing them also helps. And it's also the topics of self-esteem was very important one for me. So thank you for all those things. I think I have to watch it once again and think about them once more, because there were many good topics that were risen here in our conversation. So thank you for them. Thank you, Karima, for those words. And so do you have anything to add? Would you like to say something in the end?
I just want to say thank you, because we would have been a lot worse off if we were talking in Polish.
Yeah, I think so, yes. Okay. Maybe we can switch to any other language. Maybe, I don't know, Romanian.
We can speak in Afrikaans if you want.
Okay, we will try. Okay, so good one. Carla, would you like to say something in the end?
Yeah, there was a comment that I wanted to just pick up on, because it was mentioned a couple of times, I think, and it was from Ursula, and she was talking about the book, with the slaves that was mentioned at the beginning, and she says, let me go back and see if I can finish. She says, just one comment off topic. Yes, the presence of slaves in a book doesn't mean the book is racist. In this way, most history books and textbooks should be perceived like that. And then she goes on to say, a wise teacher will make good of the content, showing the proper perspective. And I think that it's a comment that is really relevant at the moment, because there's a lot of talk I see in social media and just on news and all of this, about race and things like that. And I think that it does affect a lot of people's well-being now, and it's connected to our children and the way we educate our children. But it's also a sensitive topic that sometimes people just want to skip over, despite the fact that it's having such an impact, definitely in the US and in some parts of Europe also. And I think that this is one of those examples of those subjects that we were talking about earlier, that we can trust that our children can handle it, And I love the fact that Ursula mentions the fact that if you're a good teacher, you can take any content, even something that might be controversial and might be sensitive, and you can bring out the good in that. If it's a painting or something from history, we know there are lots of artifacts and books and things from history that were written in a very insensitive or created in a very insensitive or biased way. But even with those materials, if you have the right attitude yourself, you can take them and you can use them as tools to educate children. And I think that's much healthier than censorship or than hiding things. you know, and saying that our children can't handle it, or it's negative. You know, we say, oh, this is negative, so I'm not going to talk about it, but that's not necessarily true. And I think it is important to just point that out. So thank you, Ursula, for that comment.
Okay. Michał, would you like to say something in the end?
Yes, I would like to thank very much Robin and Carla for invitation, so accepting the invitation. And I can say that I met Carla at her workshop, amazing workshop. She's performing amazing workshops, and really I learn a lot. And also from Robin, I met in Marrakesh. I learn a lot, and I would like that you share your wisdom to Polish educational system. And we have great people here who would like to really build new type of educational system. And you're in the community, this EDU-klaster, which groups people who really want to give the best to the children, and they are motivated, and they are really, I think, happy teachers and motivated teachers to transform educational system into the way of well-being for all children.
Okay, so thank you very much. It was really nice meeting you. It was really nice talking to you. So goodbye, and we see our audience tomorrow, probably the day after tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. So and so on and so on until the end of Facebook. So thank you very much, and have a nice weekend. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.